odio y cruel.
Today, we are going to talk about premier Uruguayan goth band RRRRRR. Yes, it is pronounced that way. I checked. 7 R's in a row. RRRRRR is said to be Uruguay's first official goth band, as well as their longest lasting. According to my research, they started in winter of 1987 in Montevideo, Uruguay. Lead man Lady Ego had previously been the lead singer for Insurrección in the mid-80s, but that didn't last. They had their first gig in 1989 and released some demos in 1990. The lineup has changed a bit over the years, but their current lineup includes Lady Ego on vocals and programming, Velvet Irofant on guitar, Nikki Benedicto also on guitar, and Ludivan on bass. RRRRR has mostly been active in the music scene in Montevideo, but they've also toured Buenos Aires, Argentina twice, their only times leaving Uruguay thus far. They had the pleasure of backing up Peter Murphy and Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds during those artists' performances in Uruguay. Aside from original material, this band has also covered songs by Christian Death, The Cure, Bauhaus, David Bowie, and Joy Division, all of whom are some of their musical inspirations. Speaking of musical inspiration, that brings us to the most important aspect of any band, their sound. Existing for 3 decades, RRRRR has experienced some evolution in their sound, but if I were to describe an overall sound that they've adhered to, I guess it would be the more post-punk side of goth, which isn't surprising considering when they started. Though when they began, it was definitely closer to what people tend to think of, more simplistic and less layered and fewer instruments, but then over time they decided to add keyboards and more guitars, and that added more layers. There's definitely a difference between, their demos from the early 90s versus things that they had that came out in, the 2000s. But you can definitely still tell it's the same band, same voice, but there are those changes. So depending on which sound you prefer, that may vary on which era of theirs you prefer. I personally like both of those sounds, but that's just me.
Puedo exaltar mi sensación, el percibir su exclamación. Todas las rosas se verán avergonzadas. Y no digo lo que pienso, y no pienso lo que siento, y no siento lo que quiero.
But one thing I will say that while they are, the post-punk side of goth, in my opinion, some people I know have criticized post-punk music, whether, post-punk goth, post-punk in general, finding it to be, overly simplistic, to be repetitive, to be monotonous. And with some bands, I understand that criticism, but I don't think that really applies here. So I like how they definitely have, throughout their years, the groundedness of post-punk, as opposed to the more ethereal or atmospheric side of goth, which they never veered into, but they still, they're very expressive, which is nice, and there's lots of feeling. Even before they added keyboards and multiple guitars, I feel like that was the case, which maybe it's because Lady Ego has more of a tenor type voice, which doesn't lend itself quite as well to the anhedonic dronings that certain post-punk acts are famous, or should I say infamous for. But in general, so that's how I would describe them, is, post-punk but with feeling, but identifiably goth as well. And I can see why they've lasted as long as they have, because I think they're quite good, from what I've heard, which is most of their available music, which is available on SoundCloud and YouTube mostly. And I can see why those other artists wanted them to back them up. It just makes me kind of sad that they haven't really toured outside of Uruguay because I've never been there. So I wonder what will happen first. Will they come to the US or some other country that I end up in, or will I end up in Uruguay? Because I want to see them perform at some point. I think that would be cool. And I hope that you found this enlightening, and I hope that you yourself decide that you want to listen to this artist as well. Thank you, and if you want to see similar content in the future, please follow me here or on my other social media accounts. Bye.
Y delante tuyo estoy así, convertido en maniquí. El silencio pongo en práctica. Las palabras no me dañan, sigo en pose natural.